And welcome back to America Decides. Billionaires poured in huge sums of money to help President-elect Donald Trump take the White House. The world's richest man, Elon Musk, hitched his wagon to the former president, giving nearly $200 million. Now he's reportedly weighing in on staffing decisions. But what do Musk and some of these other high rollers stand to gain from another Trump administration? Well, CBS News investigative reporter Dan Klaidman joins us now for more on this. Dan, thanks so much for being here. So Musk has been hanging out at Mar-a-Lago over the past several days. He was there on Election Day and had been on the campaign trail. But of course, companies do a lot of business with the federal government. So how might the Trump administration benefit him?
Well, in so many ways. I mean, first of all, Elon Musk's business interests cross so many of the most important sectors of not just the American economy, but the global economy. You think about the fact that he is heavily invested in, obviously, electric vehicles with Tesla, space exploration and rocketry with SpaceX, satellites, and AI. These are all areas that made him the richest man in the world, and he's on his way to being maybe the first trillionaire in the world. But they are also heavily regulated parts of the economy where there's a huge difference between having regulatory relief and being what he would consider to be overly regulated in terms of how much money he can make. But the thing about a guy like Elon Musk is, as I said, he is the richest man in the world. A few $1 billion here and there may not make that much difference to him. So there's more that he's looking for. There are some people who think he is the country's first real oligarch, and that his interests transcend American policies. He stands on the global stage. This is someone who has the power to affect the course of wars and geopolitics, and has huge ambitions, space exploration, and who knows what else comes next. So all of these things, being in the United States, so close to President Trump, and being really in the administration in some ways, will make a big difference to him.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think of his current and potential reach there. What about some of these other mega donors? What were some of their motivations here?
So that's the interesting question, Caitlin. And what I set to do with this piece that I've written for CBS.com is to do a kind of a taxonomy of these mega donors. They don't all have the same motivations. Some of them are transactional. Some of them are looking for regulatory relief or tax relief, or to get, government contracts to help their bottom line. I call those the transactionalists. The crypto industry is a good example of that. They are very pragmatic about who they give money to. They give money to people who they believe will support their industry. It could be a Democrat or a Republican. For the most part, it is Republicans because Donald Trump has been very favorable toward the crypto industry. But that's really their motivation. Then there are people whose motivations are more ideological. They have a lot of money. They don't necessarily need that much more. What they want to do is use their money to affect change with hot-button social issues, foreign policy issues. A great example of that is Miriam Adelson, the casino magnate who is a big supporter of Jewish causes and of Israel. She gave hundreds of millions. She and her now deceased husband gave a lot of money in 2016. And a lot of people think that money led to Donald Trump, when he became president, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So that was her primary motivation.
So many people involved here, a lot of interest at stake as well. Dan Klaidman, I know you'll be following the money for us, as you already have. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.